Okay, so this next video is an important contrast to that. If you thought that was too lovey-dovey and you're going to throw up, guess who's on your side? Mercutio. A lot of my students think that Romeo and Juliet is a little bit ridiculous because they're so in love and all this poetry and it's goofy. And a lot of my students really don't feel great about love. They feel like it's overblown, it's ridiculous. Um, and if you feel that way, there is someone in the play who speaks for you, and that is Mercutio. Mercutio really is the voice of cynical, there's no such thing as love, only fucking. And he really gets to express that on the bottom of page 8. So once the party is over and Romeo realizes that he's fallen in love with his, family's great enemy, someone from the family that his enemy is fighting. Let me try that again. When the party's over and Romeo realizes that the girl he's fallen in love with is from a rival family to his family. They're on their way out, but because of Juliet, Romeo's gotten separated from his friends because he was with her and he loves her. He immediately sees her and immediately just is totally in love with her. And he sees her and he loves her, and Mercutio is outside, but his friends have lost him, right? They're like looking around, like, where the hell did Romeo go? And Romeo is missing, and so Mercutio makes a joke. He jokes if Romeo's not here, he's going to conjure him. And so the joke involves like a magic spell. Think of he's kidding. He doesn't really believe in magic spells. But Mercutio is like, oh, well, if Romeo's missing, I'll conjure him. So you think about it, if you're summoning a demon or something, or a ghost, you got to make a circle on the ground and you got to get bones and whatever and candles and light them and the ghost will appear, kind of stuff. So Mercutio jokingly is like, oh, Romeo's not around, I'll conjure him up. And this is the sort of spell that he uses to conjure Romeo. And again, you got to assume Mercutio is pretty drunk. In the movie, the Leonardo DiCaprio movie, Mercutio is pretty seriously on drugs when he goes on that Queen Mab speech. These fairy creatures. And by the way, I'll say this. I mentioned briefly last time. I mentioned something briefly that you guys were interested in when I was saying that Macbeth has such a powerful imagination that when he sees things, when he thinks too hard of something, they appear. Shakespeare also had a very powerful imagination, and I talked about Macbeth's fears about his imagination being so strong he'll go insane. Might have been Shakespeare's fears about his own imagination writing all these plays and going crazy. You see that with Mercutio too. Mercutio is his ability to put words together, this gigantic speech full of this interesting imaginative material about fairies and creatures. He's able to imagine those fairies in such detail. He's literally describing the little tiny whips that they use to get the little tiny grasshopper horses to move the little nutshell cart that they live inside of. Shakespeare may have thought of himself there too. That Shakespeare's the one who thinks of these amazing imaginative creatures, and he's the one, like Mercutio, that spews out all these words, and Romeo's like, dude, peace, Mercutio, peace. That talks to nothing. Shakespeare, right? All of his plays are beautiful, but they're not real. Shakespeare talks to nothing. Mercutio's not a real person. Juliet's not a real person. Romeo's not a real person. So it's worth thinking about Mercutio as Mercutio, Macbeth, and Shakespeare may be linked because they have vivid imaginations. And Mercutio in particular is very good at stringing massive, complicated words together in these incredibly imaginative visions, just like Shakespeare is. So to go to Mercutio now and take a look at what he says, I'm on the bottom of page 8. Now, this is often, Romeo and Juliet's often taught in high school, but this part of the play is too dirty to teach in high school. I don't know how high school teachers do it. So he says, where the hell did Romeo, my cousin Romeo, and they can't find him. He ran this way and leapt this orchard wall. Call, good Mercutio. Mercutio says, nay, I'll conjure too. Romeo humors, you might think of meaning like hormones. Romeo humors, madman, passion, lover. Appear thou in the likeness of a sigh, because Romeo is always sighing about the girl that he loves, and so Mercutio is using that to conjure him. Speak but one rhyme, and I am satisfied, because Romeo is a bit of a poet. Cry but I me, and pronounce but love and dove. So he's joking about the way Romeo talks. He's always writing poetry, love poetry, and of course in love poetry, dove always rhymes with love. Speak to my gossip Venus one fair word. Venus is the goddess of love. Remember, the VEN in Venus is the same VEN in venereal diseases. They are sexually transmitted diseases are called venereal diseases because they are the diseases of the goddess of love. Speak to my gossip Venus one fair word, one nickname for her purblind son and heir. Young Abraham Cupid. See, purblind here is like, because Venus's child is Cupid, and Cupid often has a blindfold on, but he calls him blind. He that shot Trim when King Cafetta loved the beggar maid. So he's just going into like crazy history stuff now. This is a story about a king who falls in love with a poor person. He heareth not, he stirreth not, it moveth not. The ape is dead, and I must conjure him. So he really gets lost again in here with these crazy references to things because he's so intense. And then he continues to conjure Romeo. This is like the spell. I conjure thee, like if you were conjuring a demon, you'd be like, I conjure this demon in the name of Satan. He says, I conjure Romeo by Rosalind's bright eyes, by her high forehead, by her scarlet lip, by her fine foot, straight leg, and quivering thigh, and um, the demences that there adjacent lie. So he's conjuring him by this is the way Romeo talks in his poetry. A lot of love poetry is like, oh, your eyes are so bright, and your forehead is so beautiful, and your lips are red like scarlet, and you have these beautiful feet. So he's using the kind of poetry stuff to conjure him up. But notice that Mercutio, they're physical things. Right, it's like her lip, her eyes. Mercutio is interested in. It's like he thinks that sex is just about like people with good-looking parts. So he says, Romeo's so in love with Rosalind that I'm going to use Rosalind's sort of beauty, her individual bits are going to conjure Romeo, just like you may have to use some kind of cursed thing to summon a demon. But he gets into like sort of sex territory here because he's listing off, right, her eyes, her forehead, her lips, her foot, her leg. You see he's going up the body, the foot, up to the leg, up to the thigh, and the dimenses that there adjacent lie, that in thy likeness thou appear to us. The areas that adjacent lie to the thigh is the vagina. So Mercutio is saying that he's conjuring up Romeo by he's going to use Rosalind's vagina to conjure up Romeo, because this is how Mercutio thinks about love. It's just it's just body parts. It's just sex. And he has more sex stuff to say. Benvolio says, if he heard you, he's going to get mad at you. Mercutio says, this cannot anger him. 'Twould anger him to raise a spirit in his mistress's circle. This doesn't sound like much, but mistress's circle here is vagina. To raise a spirit is to get an erection. 'Twould anger him to raise a spirit in his mistress's circle of some strange nature, letting it there stand, that's the erection, till she had laid it and conjured it down. So the joke being like that he's joking about Romeo having an erect penis that Rosalind would have to conjure down through sex. I don't know. I have no idea how do high school teachers just skip this? I feel like it's actually kind of important to what's going on in the play. It would anger him to raise a spirit in his mistress's circle of some strange nature, meaning he'd be angry if a strange penis, the spirit there is like because spirit is your life force, and they used to think that your life force, every time a guy ejaculated, his life force would sort of go out of his dick. And it was like every time he had an orgasm, it was like 5 minutes off your life. And so he jokes about Romeo's spirit in his mistress's circle, that's the vagina, but he'd be mad if a strange person had an erection. That would get him angry. Letting it there stand till she had laid and conjured it down with sex. My invocation is fair and honest. In his mistress's name, I conjure only to raise him up. Right? I'm just trying, the joke here meaning raise up, meaning to get an erection, but also I'm looking for Romeo to show up. Mercutio says, come, he hath laid himself out among the trees to be consorted with a humorous knight. Blind is his love, and best befits the dark. He says, if love is blind, love cannot hit the mark. Cupid is often shown blindfolded. And he says, if love is blind, he's never going to be able, no one's ever going to fall in love because Cupid's going to miss. Mercutio thinks all this love stuff about Cupid and Venus, it's all garbage. He thinks it's silly and he's making fun of it. Now will he sit under a medlar tree, and wish his mistress were that kind of fruit, as maids call medlars when they laugh alone. O Romeo, that she were an open arse, and thou a popperin pear. I'm going to let you guys look this up. I suggest you Google search popper and pear, and you Google search medlar. Um, it's pretty ridiculous. I don't have a nice way to say it, so I'm just going to say it. Medlar is like, you know how we use fruits sometimes to symbolize genitalia? Like we'll use like peaches as the peach emoticon has become like an ass because the peach emoticon has like a crack in it because peaches have that little crack in it, and that's become like a metaphor for the ass cracking. So you can send somebody a peach emoticon that's supposed to be butt. And the eggplants are like dicks. We use this as like emoticon kind of jokey stuff. But Mercutio is doing exactly that here. A medlar. A medlar, I don't know how to put this in a nice way, but a medlar is a funny kind of fruit. It's shaped funny. It looks kind of like an asshole. And a popper and pear looks sort of like a dick. And so Mercutio is literally making these are anal sex references because he says that young people wish the women they were in love with were like fruit they could pluck off a tree, but the kind of fruit he pictures is a medlar, which just looks like an asshole. And then he says, "Oh Romeo, that she were an open arse and now a popper and pear." So he comes down to sex for Mercutio, and he's pretty vulgar about it. But I think it's pretty entertaining. But I don't know. So maybe I'll put some pictures up of the medlar and the popper and pear, so you can see the kinds of jokes that Mercutio is making about dicks and butts, and just it's all fucking for him. But for Romeo, it's love.